Welcome. We're going to be discussing self-management secrets, executive function strategies for adults today. Please do ignore this little circle with the face in the bottom. Technical difficulties. My face was supposed to pop up there, but it is not popping up right now. My name is Casey Schmaliker. I'm the Vice President at New Frontiers Executive Function Coaching. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about self-management. And so we're going to be looking at what is self-management and what are executive functions, very briefly, but then going into some specific strategies of 4 areas that we do see a lot of people struggle with and a lot of people come to us to work on. So we'll be going through setting and achieving goals. We'll be going through organizational skills, time management techniques, strategies for overcoming procrastination. Now, before we get into these, I want to just share one thing over. Strategies that we're going to be talking about today, they don't work for everyone. There's a component of tailoring the strategies to yourself, your unique brain, and what are the unique problems that you're facing. So while I am going to be sharing over some strategies that I see benefit a lot of people, I would almost much rather prefer if in any of these 4 areas for you to consider an area you're struggling in and share over in the chat or the Q&A just what is that area of struggle, how you are struggling with it, and if you've tried anything to address it so far. This is a way that I could do almost a little workshopping with your particular challenges. You might need to be a guinea pig, but you'll be getting some free coaching from it, some free brainstorming of potential strategies and techniques that can support you. Other than that, you can also please feel free to go ahead and use the Q&A or the chat function to ask any questions. Please interrupt throughout, throw that in there. If easier, I can also give you microphone access if you'd prefer, just to throw in the chat that you'd love to have mic access and have the opportunity to almost do a little bit of a case study of the work that you want to work on. So getting into it, just setting the table, just to talk about self-management and executive functions. So we often think of management in terms of managing others. And so really what we're doing with self-management is it's managing your own behaviors, emotions, and thoughts in a way that leads to productive outcomes. And this is why you often hear of self-management very closely tied to executive functions. Executive functions are goal-directed cognitive processes. And we're going to be talking about a few of those today. So really, when we're looking at self-management, it's an ongoing process where we're assessing what are our current practices. We are identifying these opportunities for growth or change, and then we're looking to adapt, sustain these new strategies, and then evolve towards growth. Now, with the first one that we'll be diving into about some of our goal setting, this is really going to be focusing on this second piece of identifying opportunities for growth. We're going to be looking for where can we grow, where can we improve. And then in this third area, with the adapting, sustaining, and evolving, we'll be looking at developing other strategies to change. What I will share over, and I'll talk about this a little bit on the goal setting piece, is that a lot of us get stuck, especially as adults. When you're younger, when you're a teenager, when you're a young adult, you don't have a lot of practices. You haven't always developed a lot of routines. You're not as set in your way. But what happens when you become an adult is you start getting that sense of, I've always done it this way, or I don't have the time to change. And so this is going to be a lot of what we're discussing is how do we not just accept the status quo, and how do we actually move and grow? So let's start with setting and achieving goals. So people get stuck in the status quo and they tend to just go through the motions of the day to day. Oh, I'll do it next week. Oh, I'll wait until the weekend. And then before you know it, it's, oh, I have plans for this weekend. I'll focus on this next time. I'll do it next time. There's always, it's like a game of whack-a-mole that we live our life in, that we have our routines and behaviors that are really hard to change, and we never make the time to change them. We always make excuses. Some of that procrastination that we'll talk about at the end. So our habits, and I like to use this kind of imagery to really help us identify that these habits, they're like shackles that are holding us back. This excuse making, this avoidance of tackling these habits. As an example, I love to eat cookies at night, but I've started going to the gym recently. That habit of after dinner, I have cookies and milk. This is a shackle that's preventing me from my own physical growth, my physical health. And am I ready to give that up? I don't know. It's a behavior I have in there. And so in that sense, that behavior is a shackle holding me back. Now, I do always like to share over just the difference between goals and dreams. So this is a Napoleon Hill quote: a goal is a dream with a deadline. But I always like to further this, that a goal is a dream with a deadline and a pathway to achieve it. And so that's what's important, that we're not just talking about goals and changing dreams into goals. We're also talking about setting goals in a way that it's achievable, starting to map out how we're going to get there. So just to go with this analogy of like Google Maps in a car, a goal may be that destination that you're getting towards, but a well-set goal is one where you also are mapping out how you're going to get there. Not to say there won't be like a car crash on the way and you have to adapt your route, but it's laying the foundation of what is the pathway, what is a possible pathway for me to get there. So when we're looking at some strategies with setting and achieving goals, we're going to talk a little bit about SMART goals. We'll talk about short-term achievable goals, and we're going to talk a little bit about radical honesty. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So a lot of you, maybe if you've struggled with goal setting or you know someone that has, SMART goals is something you often hear. But I can't emphasize enough that SMART goals are so important, because by having them be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, you're removing excuse making. You're removing the hedging of what you may say or do, because you're making it objective. So what I always share over is limit how much subjectivity is in your goals, because then you're setting yourself up to justify not achieving them. And so the more objective we can make them by using SMART goals, the more we can learn from it. So when you have a goal that's not as specific, what ends up happening is that even if you make a little progress, you remove the opportunity to really learn about how could have I made more progress, because it's not defined. Now, another big aspect, and this is really about, think of these SMART goals as what you're doing is you're really setting that destination and you're starting to map out how you get there. Really what you're starting to do is map out how do you know if you're on track with your goal, not necessarily how you're moving towards the goal. And this is where what I call STAG, short-term achievable goals, really comes into play. And so short-term achievable goals is taking a long-term goal and starting to plan it out with some planning strategies to map out, great, here's this long-term, but what do I do right now to move forward to it? And so this is where you can start to build out action plans. So a long-term goal is often broken out into a couple of medium-term goals, which can be broken out into short-term goals, which then can be broken out into short-term achievable goals. Short-term achievable goals is a tool where what you're doing is you're creating tasks. It's almost like the rungs in a ladder that are helping you move up towards that long-term goal. And so when you're using this as a strategy, if you don't achieve a short-term goal, what I always do with clients is I ask them, was this short enough and was it achievable? Or do we need to break down this goal farther into action steps? That way you can encourage a growth mindset. You're not a failure for not doing it. But what you're doing is you're saying, did I really break it down small enough and small enough? So as you're going through with goal setting strategies, what really helps with starting to map out what are all the steps to achieving this long-term goal is you are making sure that that achievable step with SMART goals is there. What this also does is it helps with the time-based factor of these goals. Because if you see a lot of steps involved in achieving it, then you need to be more realistic about the time you're setting. And again, to go back just to SMART goals very briefly, goals that are unrealistic, that you can't necessarily achieve, become demotivating. And what we as humans end up doing is we just give up on it. So the goal here is to move us forward. Now, in this last piece with radical honesty, you want to avoid goals that you focus on should. I should do this. I should care about eating cookies late at night. I should be healthy. Should is not very motivating. The language of should is actually filled with guilt. Because now what we're focusing on is why don't I care? And these negative emotions help prevent us from moving forward towards goals. So when I say radical honesty, I know there's a whole book on it, but really what I'm talking about when I refer to this radical honesty is, do we really believe in the goal we're setting? Because if we don't really believe in the goal we're setting, we're just giving us some performative goal that's going to make us feel bad about ourselves. Because remember, executive functions are goal-directed behaviors. I've seen plenty of people that have great executive functions when the goal is set accurately. And then they don't have these executive functions when it's a goal they don't really subscribe to. And so being very honest with ourselves of not goals we think we should set for ourselves, but what are goals we actually want to set for ourselves? What are things we actually want to do? And so I know this presentation is on adults, but I always like to use students and kids as an example. Maybe they should have a clean room, but if it's not really a goal of theirs, they're going to have a messy room. And so understanding that being honest with ourselves about our goals and what we actually want to do is important. And this is going to lead in totally towards achieving goals. Because often when someone isn't moving towards a goal, I always ask them, is this still a goal? Because our goals are not just things that we aim for without sacrifice. Often to move towards goals, we got to sacrifice some things. We have to change the way we've done things. We have to put in work towards it. So it's really important of getting those goals we're setting accurate, an accurate reflection of what we want from ourselves, where we want to get to, and then the roadmap on how to get there. Now, as I go in just to this next one on achieving goals, if anyone has a specific example on goal setting and goal achievement, please throw it into the chat and I'll get to it. So now with goal attainment strategies. So, what's really important here is when we're moving towards a goal, A, we need to be reminded of what that goal is that we're moving towards. But we also, importantly, want some form of monitoring and feedback loops. This helps us with reflecting on progress. So, when you're doing something, we need some form of collecting data or feedback. Remember, if we set a SMART goal, it's measurable. So that measurability becomes our data and feedback in terms of what am I doing? Is it moving me towards my goals? Now, the reflecting on your progress then helps us with understanding of, am I moving forward? So do I double down on the strategies I'm using? Or am I not moving forward as quickly as I'd like or as efficiently as I like? So do I need to adjust what I'm doing? That reflecting on progress does two things. One, it reminds us of what the goal is that we're moving towards. And then two, it is helping us see on if what we're doing is working or not. So just to use an example that most people can relate to in one sense or another is to go back to fitness. When people set fitness and physical wellness goals for themselves, what's a common strategy? They take progress photos. That's their data. Their data may be progress photos, so they're measuring how they look, or it might be the scale and measuring how much they weigh, or it might be some other factors. But on that, what's happening is you reflect on it. I know I've had some friends that are using a certain strategy for weight loss and they realize they've plateaued. And so what do? They switch the way they're working out. They switch the strategy to continue moving towards that long-term goal. But that is so important when you're doing the movement towards the goals. Reflecting on your progress is telling you where you're at, but it's also a motivational tool of, hey, I may not be at my goal yet, but I'm making progress and that feels good. Progress can be slow, so building in ways to motivate ourselves through these long-term goals becomes important. Now, moving on to the balance of rigidity and flexibility. The purpose of goal setting and moving towards achieving these goals is progress. And it's progress understanding there is limited time. Now, not achieving a goal is not inherently bad. If you've moved towards it, if you've experienced growth. And so you don't want to make too many excuses of being flexible with your goals because then you might actually inhibit your growth and prevent moving forward. But you also don't want to be too rigid with your goals because if you are making progress and maybe you didn't achieve that actual long-term goal, but you're 50% closer to the goal. That's 50% success in that sense. So we don't want the fact that you didn't achieve the long term to prevent you from acknowledging the progress you have made. And so I do like to just share this over, and this will also come up with our planning, but a great Dwight D. Eisenhower quote talking about, in preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And so what's happening here is it's talking about just because you don't always get to the full implementation of that plan, that the full implementation of the plan isn't really the use of it. What it's meant to do is to start getting you to think about moving forward, to start considering these aspects and start laying the framework for growth and forward movement. So now organizational skills. So first off, organization is really a time management strategy. And we'll talk about this, but this is really talking about physical organization. Organization also does impact our mental health, more so from, at least in my experience. I'd love to know if there's research on this, but in my experience, it has a larger impact on our mental health when we're older. When we're younger, we tend to be okay with disorganization. It doesn't seem like that much of a problem, but there are impacts on our mental health as well. Feeling messy and disorganized can lead to states of anxiety and feeling agitated, or like a fear of I'm missing something or I'm losing something. We will also talk about this other factor of organization as well. Organization can really refer to two main aspects: mental organization and physical organization. More often than not, people think of physical, but I did want to touch on some of the mental organization as well. So mental organization is really our organization of our thoughts. And we'll talk through some strategies on this, but the biggest strategy overarching is if you feel disorganized in your thoughts, we want to get it out and make it concrete. Get it out of your brain and into some physical form to help with organizing our thoughts. What's important here is this really is tapping into our working memory as an executive function. Now, physical organization is organization of space, organization of our materials, our belongings. So when we're looking at some strategies with these organizational skills, so with mental organization, mind mapping is really writing down in a visual sense our thoughts with a central idea and ideas coming out of it, almost like a web diagram where you're starting to take interconnected ideas and thoughts and you're giving it a visual representation. So that's one great way to take what's going on in a disorganized fashion up here. And now what you're doing is you're giving a visual representation, which almost is easier to manipulate and organize because you're not holding it all in your head. Now, another category is categorization. So this has a lot more to do with organizing tasks that we need to do. And so what we're looking at with categorization is let's group together similar types of tasks. And so a lot of adults do this. What are my work responsibilities? What are my personal responsibilities? What are my responsibilities for my kids or my animals or this? And you group together these different aspects of thoughts into these categories. A great way for organizing that is to have lists that are organized into different fashions. Are you going to, if you have a grocery shopping list, but you also need to go to Staples for back to school shopping for your kids, are you going to put it on the same list mixed together? No, you're going to categorize them to help organize everything you need to get. Some of this stuff we do in our head automatically. We chunk that information together. But it also is a great way to, just like mind mapping, you're taking the information and you're making it physical, you're writing it out. It can be very beneficial with categorization. Now, task chunking is really starting to associate tasks you have to do with each other. So where categorization is almost more of like the list making of organizing our thoughts into different categories, task chunking is more about when you're doing these things. So if you know that, like, if you need to go to the store for food shopping, yes, you might have a list with it, but if you need to stop at 2 stores, you're going to do both at the same time more often. It's not like, oh, I'll go to this one store and then I'll go to another store. You're chunking your tasks together that are similar tasks so that you're already kind of in that mindset. I'm doing shopping. So your brain is already thinking that way and operating that way, and you're doing similar tasks at that same time. And then lastly, just as like a high level, list making, note taking, and file organization. So we have a lot of thoughts in our head. Oh, I have to do X, Y, and Z today. Put it on a list. Don't just rely on your mental organization if it's something that you can be forgetful of things. Put it out there. I saw one question come in about techniques to retain what is learned. Well, what's really important here is, when we're talking about a mental organization way, note-taking is so important. We're not going to go so much into like memorization techniques and things like that. But first off is in order to retain what is learned, we need to have a clear place to go to of what do I need to learn. So rather than relying on your working memory and holding things in your head, you want to be creating some physical manifestation of that information that you do need to learn, and then working through strategies on how do I now get this information into my head in a reliable sense. And then also just file organization. Not like this is really looking at our computers or on our phones and tablets. How are we organizing our files? Now, with physical organization, some people are just generally more organized than others. It comes naturally. But people that struggle with physical organization, you guys, you can't really see my desk. I have a blurred background, but my desk was a little disorganized earlier. It wasn't really a problem. I knew where everything was, but I dedicated some time to organizing myself. Is my desk going to be messy by the end of the day? Potentially. Is it a problem? Not so much. But I'm going to dedicate time to then reorganize myself. And there could be two levels as a strategy for this. We could have weekly organizing time. So even when I was back in college, like cleaning up and organizing my room, it was like something I looked forward to. Friday after class, I'd blast music and I'd organize my desk. I'd organize things. I still do that to this day. Sometimes on Friday, I'm just like, oh, my brain is shot. I can't do more work. But oh, let me do my 30 minutes of organizing my desk, organizing my files. So there's a weekly level of maintaining certain organization. Then there's a larger scale of maybe monthly, every other month of, are my kind of current organization systems working for me? And so this is where you might do larger scale. But what's important here is the real strategy here is you need to dedicate time. There isn't just this magic wand fix of this is how I'm going to organize. Yes, there are like specific strategies of if you haven't used something in the past week, then do you really need it accessible? And we can go into that, but there are so many specific organization strategies for different types of people. The key thing is if you're not dedicating time to get organized, that's the first place to start. And really carving out that time that it's important. Because if you let things get out of control, if you aren't doing some form of either weekly or bi-weekly organization, then it gets overwhelming and then we push it off. Now, this is a strategy actually from my colleague, Samantha Feynman. So she shared this Yiddish term over with me, mishigash. And mishigash means like craziness and all over the place. And so what I mean by controlled mishigash is having a place to put all the things that you're not ready to organize. So I use a lot of, we'll see if you guys can see it, but I use a lot of sticky notes. So I write down notes. So I have a bunch of different ones that I'm using. What I do, rather than constantly trying to organize those, because that's a lot of task shifting, I have a literal drawer where I can put all of my notes every week. And then at the end of the week, I go through my notes and I see what I need or what I don't. That's a form of controlled mishigash. There might be times you're disorganized, but rather than having the disorganization of materials be everywhere, let's have that disorganization be in some controlled area. And so these are ways that we then, in our dedicated organized time, can go through our mishigash pile. We can go through these things in a structured way, but where it also helps is if you're ever missing something or can't find something, go to your mishigash pile first. It might be there. I use this a lot as a recommendation for adults. You should have like a mishigash bowl, right? You come into the house, what goes into there? Your keys, your wallet, everything you might need. That way, anytime you're leaving, you know where to go. Is it in that mishigash bowl? It's a way to help make sure that things aren't uncontrolled and disorganized everywhere, but that we're containing it to make it easier to tackle. You also want to establish the working systems of organization, and this should often be the first one. This is one that might be more monthly. It might be when you're starting off. Is let's try to set up an actual system, right? So this might be, how do I organize my desk? Where do I put papers? Where do I put bills? Where do I put mail I need? But starting to really figure out homes for these things. This can be ongoing, especially with like a controlled mishigash. You might realize, hey, I've been getting all of these, like, where do I put all of my tax information? Great, it's in my mishigash file, but maybe I should have my tax return saved somewhere. So taking time to see where there are areas of disorganization and slowly trying to establish some strategies of where's the home for this? And doing this, typically, I'd say, trying to evaluate your systems of organization. I would do it anytime you're feeling like your disorganization is becoming a problem. But B, maybe doing it every 6 months or maybe at least once a year, really trying to reflect on how am I organizing myself on more of a bird's eye view, an upper level view of this. So I'm going to move ahead, but again, if there are any specific case study examples you want to share over, please do. So now time management. So time management is such a misnomer. I always share there's no such thing as time management. Time is unmanageable. Time is a constant. Time is always moving forward. What time management really is self-management within the confines of time. So understanding that we can't control time, but we can control ourselves within it. So it really is 3 different skill sets, and I always like to break them out. So the first is time awareness. So time awareness is understanding the passage of time in the moment. When you don't have this, it's referred to as time blindness. So for example, if I thought I've only been talking for 5 minutes and I have 55 more minutes in my presentation, I'm going to go about my presentation very differently. But I might not have the best time awareness, but I have a strategy that I'm constantly looking down at the clock. I know we have 24 minutes left in this hour. So if I didn't realize that, if I wasn't aware of the passage of time in the moment, I might be experiencing some time blindness. This becomes very important for more of this time management concept that we'll be talking about. Now, the other aspect of time awareness is the more aware you are of the passage of time in the moment, the better you will get at estimating how long things will take. So I know just from experience and doing things a lot and reflecting on my time awareness, how much I can fit in a presentation. I'll actually be a little honest. Typically, I run out of time, and so maybe I need to work on my estimating of how long I can get through a presentation. But it's also really, really important because you can't do this next skill set without being able to estimate how long things will take. So next, with planning. Planning is determining what to do and when in our limited time. And it's about breaking down tasks into actionable units. So it's very difficult for a long-term goal to just estimate how long a long-term goal is going to take us to achieve. But if you break down that long-term goal into tasks that are actionable units, now we're much better at being able to plan out, are we able to get it done? I do this a lot with people. Maybe they have like a quarterly goal in their job where we map out. I'm like, hey, how much do you think you need to get done a week? And they're like, I have absolutely no idea. Well, then we say, well, there's 13 weeks in a quarter. Can you break this down into less than 13 tasks? Then it starts helping them see really the planning and the awareness of time coming together. Lastly, we have prioritization and prioritizing. So, whereas planning is determining what to do and when, prioritizing is really, they go hand in hand, but prioritizing is to determine the order in which to do things. And you're going to be basing this on both its importance and time constraints with it. Now, just back to importance, what's important here is goal setting, right? Understanding the goals and why we're doing things. So, to look at some strategies with time awareness, a great thing is time tracking. This helps really make time concrete. And so, what I mean by time tracking is really almost having a task log. So, think of like when you may have been an hourly worker and you had a log when you clocked in and when you clock out. Well, think of that, but matching up with tasks we do. So, I am doing X after work, and I did it for 1 hour. Then I had an hour to do this. But what you're doing is you're making it very concrete for yourself to see how long things take you. Because remember, if you need to get to laundry, so let's say I needed to get to laundry today. I'd look at my calendar, I'd see when I have availability, and I need to be able to say laundry will take me, well, it will take me about 10 minutes to get it in, then I have to flip it over after 40 minutes, and then that'll take 5 minutes, and then when it's done in the dryer, then I'll need about 15 to 20 minutes to fold it. Well, in order to know that, that was years of me reflecting on the time awareness of how long these things take. So, especially with new tasks, but building up your time awareness by having a log of what you're doing and how long it takes you can help you build that up. A quick thing I also just want to share over. This is a great way for you to reflect on things like, how much am I on my phone? How much am I watching TV? This is a great way to be non-judgmental on ourselves, but really looking at what we're doing and where our time's going. It's why that the screen time usage on iPhones, I'm sure they have them on Android as well, but it's so useful because it helps us reflect on how much time was I actually on my phone. And that becomes data to help us with planning ourselves and adjusting what we're doing. Another thing is using alerts and alarms. So if you really do experience some time blindness, like a great thing here would be me having some type of alert going off, maybe on my Apple Watch, that says you're a quarter through this presentation, you're 30 minutes through the presentation, you're 45 minutes through. These alerts and alarms can help us really avoid that time blindness by building in short bits of stop, how long have I spent on this? How much longer do I have? Now, with planning and prioritization, just because they're so overlapped, I didn't want to separate out some of the strategies and techniques, so I'm going to present them over together. So first off is a master list of tasks and responsibilities. In order to plan and prioritize, so let's tackle prioritization first. How do you know what is most important unless you're looking at everything? And so sometimes we prioritize what we're doing without having a full picture, and that's inaccurate prioritization. You only have limited time, so we need to know everything that needs to get done in order to prioritize accurately. But also with the planning, how do you plan out when you're doing things if you don't understand everything you need to do? And so this is really helpful for just remembering and forgetfulness. If you have a master list, so mine's not too bad right now, but I got a master list here. So when I'm planning out my week or my day, I pull up my master list and I look at what needs to get done this week and I start to plug it in to my calendar. Looking at things on a daily, weekly, and monthly sense is really important. So when you have your master list, you might look through certain things and you say, there's a deadline this month. I need to make sure I'm breaking this down into short-term achievable goals. Where do I need to be? Then and with monthly plans, understand monthly plans are going to be open to change. They're less rigid, they're more flexible. But keeping in mind that with monthly plans, and I'll talk about this probably a little bit later in this set, but you want to give yourself room for error because you can on a monthly scope. So if something is due the third Friday, maybe aim to have it done the second Friday, knowing that with Murphy's Law, things that can go wrong will go wrong. So you're building in a buffer for yourself for things to go wrong. Now, weekly schedules are a little bit more set in stone. They're not fully set in stone, but this gives us a real look at what do I have to do within this week? What needs to get done? And then daily is the most rigid of these. These are things that you're really focusing on what needs to happen today. Now, this all gets informed by your master list. Your weekly plan can be informed by your monthly plans, and your daily plans can be informed by your weekly plan. This is a little bit of a preview for procrastination as well. So what ends up happening is if you're only looking at a daily view, you might think you have a lot of free time today. But you're not looking at that tomorrow is going to be packed. So wouldn't it really help out, rather than my free time today, what if I split the two? And then I could have a little free time tomorrow as well. So that's where having a weekly view and then pulling out the daily can really help with planning and prioritizing your time. Now, time blocking versus specific task blocking. So I share both of these over because I have worked with clients that one was amazing where the other was horrible for them. And this is a perfect example of strategies being particular to the individual. So time blocking is, for example, I like to do deep work. I like to carve out time that I can play some relaxing music and really go into deep thought with work. Now, I'm going to pause for 1 second. I had a good question come in. Is there a planner, template, or system that I recommend for lists? I don't have a particular one. What I find, and this is really for myself, and I've seen it with some clients I've worked with, for lists, the master list concept, I find a pad of paper to be the absolute best, or a whiteboard. And the reason why I do is, let me see, I think I threw it out, but this is it. So I'll share with you guys. So I have this list. You can see some things are crossed out on it. That physical aspect of I crossed out is a motivating factor for me. It feels really good to see that 50% of this list was done. When I copied over to a new list, it feels really good to see that I was able to cross out 2 on my list already. I am motivated. I got 2 big things done today already. Amazing. I'm going to tackle my list more. So I personally recommend on lists, when you do things on the phone or the computer, if you're not crossing it out, it's almost as if that win you had never even happened. And so I find it very motivating for people to have a physical list. Now, in terms of daily, weekly, and monthly planning, I find, and I know this isn't always like the what people want to hear, use digital calendars. They just travel with you. They're visual. They're very helpful. In terms of monthly, sometimes I use a digital calendar or recommend, but sometimes those kind of monthly plannings just go on to the list. But what I think is most important with this is your motivation. If you don't find, oh, by the way, the last thing that's super motivating is writing over a new list and then wrinkling this up and moving forward, and now I have a clean list. That was the other aspect that I wanted to share. So it really is about finding something that you're willing to use. Some people, especially if your job as an adult is more on the go, it might be hard to carry a list around with you. And so having something on your phone may be better. So it really does depend on your situation. For anyone that has a dedicated working space and you're there consistently, having a list on your desk is really good. Now, just to move it forward a little bit with time blocking and specific task blocking. So, time blocking, I was talking about deep work. And so, for me, when I was doing this presentation, I used a specific task blocking strategy. I looked at my calendar, I found when I had an hour, and I blocked off in my calendar a specific task I was doing. And I gave myself a start time and an end time. Some people really benefit by having start times and end times for all of their tasks. So knowing, okay, I'm going to do an hour on this and then I have to move to this. These people, what ends up happening is if they don't have it broken out, they can overspend time on specific tasks. But the flip end, I've worked with people that can be extremely anxiety inducing. That, oh my God, what if I'm not done? I have 5 more minutes, and oh my God, I only have 10 more minutes to be able to do this. What am I going to do? And the specific task blocking can actually become a problem because it's causing more anxiety than it is relieving and supporting. So another aspect is time blocking, where I'll use a student example just because it's so easy to see how they do this. You go to school and then, okay, for the 3 hours after I'm home from school, I'm going to do homework. Then I'm going to have dinner. And then for an hour after dinner, I'm going to do chores. So none of those things were specific tasks. They were blocked tasks using from we talked before about task chunking. Time blocking is using task chunking, but just dedicating time to those tasks. So it's a great way to have a general structure that maybe you have to adapt a little bit, but it is setting aside those specific times to do things. The Eisenhower matrix, if you look it up, it basically is a way to help you with prioritizing. So this is looking at the level of importance of something and then the level of like how much time you have. So if something is urgent or not urgent, and if it's important or not important. And you want to be focusing more of your efforts and getting to things sooner on things that are important and urgent than things that are not urgent and not important. 2-minute rule, quick strategy, something that's going to take you less than 2 minutes, do it right now. It actually will waste time to go add it to your to-do list or your master list when you could just do it right now. A great way for planning is maybe build in some 15-minute blocks to do your 2-minute tasks throughout your day. And then conservative planning and building in found time. So especially while you're working on your time awareness, I always recommend allocate more time than you think you're going to need. Because that way, if you do need more time, great, you have it already planned out. And if you don't need that time, then you have found time where you'll be able to maybe do some of your 2-minute tasks or other things. It's better to have additional free time than to have not enough planned time. Now, overcoming procrastination. So procrastination is the assumption of free time now. I always like to present it that way. Oh, yeah, I got 10 minutes to go on my phone. I literally said to myself right before this presentation, oh, I have a couple of minutes. I can take a break. I'll do my lunch. Guess what? I got on at 11:50 and I was trying to figure out the presentation and it wasn't working, right? I procrastinated getting the presentation fully set up. I assumed that I had free time then and that I would be able to later do the tasks I needed to do. Guess what? Figuring out those tech issues, I didn't save enough time. So my assumption of free time then was wrong. I chose to do other things that were more pleasurable than what I needed to do because I thought it wouldn't take as much time. So front loading is the opposite of procrastination. It's guaranteeing free time later. So if I do everything that I need to do this week, if I got it all done today, then I might be guaranteeing free time tomorrow. Or the key to this, and this is where we're all sometimes in denial, problems are going to come up tomorrow that I will need that time. So rather than just assuming I have free time now, procrastination, front loading is the opposite, where we're trying to guarantee free time later. It really does help with anxiety as well. The more we're focused on getting everything that we need to get done now, then when we actually are using our free time, we actually can convince ourselves that we're not missing things and that we shouldn't be doing other things. So pleasure seeking and its role in procrastination, it's just important to understand that sometimes procrastination is really like an emotional regulation aspect or immediate gratification problems. And so when I'm seeking out immediate gratification, so earlier before this presentation, I wanted to go get some pleasure. I wanted some free time. I wanted to go around on Twitter. I wanted to do whatever. Those things were much more gratifying in the moment than sitting down and figuring out the presentation. But that is that instant gratification that's harming me, because then the longer term gratification of having a super successful presentation where my face popped up in this bottom corner, that wasn't an immediate thing I was going to feel. So that pleasure seeking is what prevented that from moving forward. So it often is, in order to address procrastination, we got like procrastination. What is procrastination? It's just not doing something now. But we got to know why we're not doing something now in order to come up with strategies. So sometimes we procrastinate because we don't know how to get started. Initiation challenges. Sometimes we procrastinate because of this cognitive dissonance, where that whole idea of, I do have free time now, I'll be able to get to it. It's this lying to ourselves, this denial and avoidance of things. And it's not, I purposely, I know I just said lying to ourselves, but lying to ourselves can sometimes feel like it's conscious. But really, we're talking about like a subconscious lying to ourselves to make ourselves feel better in the moment. A couple of my other ones got deleted. But we'll go through some of the strategies here. So first off is looking at some activating strategies. So this is like how to eat an elephant. So it goes back to our goal setting, that if you haven't broken down short-term achievable goals, what you're ending up doing when you sit down to start a task or do something is you're spending a lot of energy on, where do I even start? And so the saying of how to eat an elephant, it's bit by bit. But now the next thing becomes, what bit do I eat first, right? And so this ties into some planning strategies. When you're leaving, there's something called decision fatigue. When you constantly have to make decisions, you're using parts of your brain to constantly be thinking about, should I do this one? What if it's the wrong choice? Oh, well, let's choose this one. And we're constantly sticking our neck out. So when we're focusing on how to eat an elephant, it's bit by bit. But further, in terms of strategies, is sometimes the task should be planning out how we're going to do other tasks, using planning as a way to overcome procrastination. So if I sit down and have to say, oh, I'm doing homework, or, oh, I'm going to work on my marketing goals for the quarter. Okay, now when I sit down to work on my marketing goals, where do I start? And now I'm taking brain energy to get started. And you know what ends up happening? I don't feel prepared, so let me go do something else. I'll come back to this when I'm ready. Well, you're only going to be ready when you plan out what you're doing. So that's an activating strategy. Another activating strategy to overcome procrastination, there's two. So limiting the commitment. So the Pomodoro technique, many people know of this, but it really is almost like a timer. You commit to doing 25 minutes of work, and then you take a 5-minute break, and then you do 25 minutes of work, 5-minute break. This is a way where you're not committing to doing this whole big, monumental, overwhelming task. What you're doing is you're committing to a chunk of it. And that can feel less daunting for ourselves. The other way is just 5-minute commitments. So I've done this with a lot of people where there's a lot of fear. By the way, just jumping back, two other sources of those procrastination, overwhelm is one of them. And some of them, another one is like that anxiety stemming from perfectionism, of really wanting to do things perfectly and do things well. So 5 minute commitments, what's great about these 5 minute commitments is, again, they're not as overwhelming. And sometimes, especially for people that have a fear of failure or they're doing things incorrectly, I often ask them, just commit to doing it for 5 minutes and see how you're feeling. If it's not feeling like it's jiving right now, you can shift to another task, or maybe you're going to realize, hey, you know what? This is easier than I thought. You can get buy-in to commit to things much easier that way. So using STAG, as we've talked about, making sure that you're breaking that down. Is it very clear of what you need to do? And is it broken down into an achievable goal? Also, getting started 101. If you really find yourself struggling, so I know for myself, what does getting started look like for you? For myself, my morning, I get my cup of coffee, I make sure I have my bottle of water, I play music, make sure all my apps are open. I have a ritual of getting started. And so that ritual makes it easier to not procrastinate the start of my workday. So for areas that you may be procrastinating, starting to think of what does getting started actually look like for me. Also, aspects of this is limiting distractions. So sometimes you can be easily distracted when we want to procrastinate. So let's remove those excuses for not getting started. As I talked about that decision fatigue, limit the number of decisions. So at 3 o'clock, you were sitting down and doing X, Y, and Z. There's no decision of what I need to do. It's just I need to do it. Another area with procrastination is accountability. So setting deadlines for yourself, you can self-impose these deadlines. You can tie them to these short-term achievable goals. It removes a lot of area of making excuses for this. But another one that's really important in terms of accountability is, if not, what do I lose? So as an adult, if I don't get my work done for the day by 5 p.m., I have to work later. That is very clear. Ask yourself, when you find yourself procrastinating, if not now, what might I be sacrificing in the future? And that can help us really see the consequences of that behavior. Public pledges. So just sharing something with someone else, it creates this sense of accountability. It's part of our coaching is accountability coaching. So by committing to something externally and out loud, it actually helps motivate us to prevent the procrastination. Because what ends up happening is you have one little voice in your head that says, don't you want to have fun now? Don't you want to do these other more enjoyable things? But then you can start to have another voice of, well, what would Casey say? Because he's going to ask me about this. And so you're almost counterweighting that voice that is going for immediate gratification with some other aspects of, well, what might these people say? You're counteracting that voice in your head. Habit pairing and stacking. So this is a great way of things that you find yourself procrastinating a lot. For me, folding clothes. I procrastinate folding clothes so often. But what do? I've paired together listening to a podcast to folding clothes. So when I fold clothes, I listen to a podcast. I'm taking something I enjoy and I'm tying it to something I don't really enjoy. But now I actually look forward to folding clothes because it's paired with a habit that I do enjoy. And then rewards. And so on one sense, looking at intrinsic rewards, really focusing on what am I procrastinating and do I understand why I'm doing it? Is it clear the goal that I'm moving towards with this? And then on the other end, you might need some extrinsic rewards. So if I work really hard, I'm then going to go do X, Y, and Z. What we often find is we procrastinate opposite and we just set ourselves up for failure. Let me do the enjoyable thing now and I'll be more in the mood to do the less enjoyable thing later. That is us lying to yourself. Use when you procrastinate, look at the things you're doing instead of what you need to be doing. Use that activity as the carrot at the end of the stick, and that stick that you're moving towards is the task that you need to motivate yourself through. So, thank you guys. I know we're a little bit over, but I'm going to go up to some of the initial questions that came in. And then if anyone else has others, I'm able to stay a little bit later. By the way, I told you guys my time awareness isn't perfect. So, just looking at some of this, I got to the retaining bit, and I can totally do for the question that came in about retaining what is learned. That really would be its own professional development. Just so everyone knows, I do share over a feedback survey afterwards. I'll send you guys the email for that. I always ask for additional topics to do these webinars on. So please throw in anything that we didn't get to today or that you were expecting. I do see one on procrastination and too much to do for my energy and capacity. So what's important here, there's a couple of aspects we'd want to unpack. You might want to look at the energy and capacity. Is it just your energy capacity? Are there things that we can do to work on increasing the energy and capacity? Or are you taking on too much? Or committing to too much? Do we need to find other ways to eat that elephant in a more manageable way? But with the procrastination piece, we did just talk through some of those. So if there are some additional, if you wanted to elaborate a bit on the problem, I can talk more to that. Okay, question on the last slide. Just wanted to pull this up. And I see some other coming in, so please go away with any questions or comments you may have. All right. While anyone else might be typing, again, I'm just Casey Schalaker from New Frontiers. This is my Calendly. I know my last name is not easy. I wish it was easier to spell out, but if anyone wanted to hop on, I'm always happy to hop on a quick meeting. Always happy to chat. If you do have general questions or wanted to learn more just about New Frontiers, our website is there, as well as our contact email and phone number to give us a call. I do appreciate everyone coming. I hope everyone was able to enjoy a nice lunch hour with me. And please do fill out that form. I really do appreciate it. And I say this every time, but I'd rather do webinars on things you guys want to learn about, what you guys want. This is a way we're able to give back. And so I'd much rather speak to the things you want to learn about than me guessing what you want to learn about. So we'll have one in September. I look forward to seeing you guys, and I hope everyone has a great day.